Welcome everyone to tonight's council meeting for Monday the 13th of July 2020. Stand for the opening prayer and acknowledgement of the country, please. We ask that you guide us in our decision making, protect us and the community we serve from all that is evil, and strengthen our unity for the welfare of the city. Amen. I would like to acknowledge the Wiradjuri people as the traditional custodians of the land that we meet upon today, and pay my respects to the elders past, present and future, for they hold the memories, culture, tradition and hopes of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people that contribute to our community. Thank you. Okay, CM2. This council meeting is being webcast and recorded. By speaking at the council meeting, you agree to being recorded and webcast. Please ensure that if and when you are speaking at this council meeting that you are respectful to other people and use appropriate language. Albury City accepts no liability for any defamatory or offensive remarks or gestures made during the course of this council meeting. An audio recording will be made for administrative purposes. Conflict of interest declarations, I've received several. First one is from Councillor David Thurley. Non-pecuniary, significant, brief description. I'm a member of the Southern Regional Planning Committee, which will consider this DA. Type of meeting is council. CM 13.2, extension of Anderson's clay mine, and the action is leave the chamber. Councillor Vanderven, nature conflict, non-pecuniary, less than significant. I'm a member of the Southern Region Planning Board, which will be considering this DA. 13.2 DA is the same as the previous extension of the Anderson clay mine, and the action is leave the meeting and will not participate in the discussion. Councillor Amanda Conn, nature of conflict, non-pecuniary, less than significant, brief description. The development site is less than 50 metres from my primary residential address and will be visible. Relevant CM 13.4, development application DA 10.2020.37316. Action is remain in the meeting but not vote or participate in the debate. Councillor Conn, nature of conflict of interest, non-pecuniary, significant. I'm the alternate delegate to the regional planning panel that will require to determine this development application. Item 13.2, the development application is the extension of the Anderson clay mine, and the action is to log off from the meeting while the item is being discussed. Okay, Mr. Zachnich.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, sorry. Councillor Vanderman, you have a question about the conflicts?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I just may I query whether we have a quorum then to have a vote on the particular issue with the remaining councillors on deck.
Well, we've got a quorum to hold the meeting, so I'd assume
okay. If that's the normal process, that's fine.
Yeah.
It only leaves you 4 councillors physically present and able to vote, or not. Yeah, well, that's right as well. But just wondering what the circumstances are. Yeah, that's fine. No worries.
Thank you, Councillor Vanderman. Okay, Mr. Zachnich.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just to confirm, though, the question from Councillor Vanderven, the councillors who have declared non-pecuniary less than significant interest are all staying in the room for those items and not participating, though.
That's right.
Yeah.
They're just not participating in the discussion or the voting.
Okay. So if we haven't got a quorum, we're not able to deal with those matters then.
So what you're suggesting, if the meeting has a quorum prior to those matters being discussed, we don't have a quorum after the matters because of their status
of interest. Yeah. So we won't be able to consider those matters without a quorum in place.
Okay. Well, we'll just have to defer those items, I suppose. The only thing we can do for now.
That's correct. Yep.
So will we need no, we shouldn't need a motion to defer. We just do not list them.
When we get to those items, through Mr. Mayor, that'd be the appropriate time.
Yeah. Okay. Mr. Zachnich.
Thank you. Advice to the council meeting regarding the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act 1979, Section 10.4 requires a person submitting planning applications or submissions regarding a planning application to disclose any reportable political donation and or gifts to any local councillor or employee of the council. Reportable political donations include those of or above $1,000. The disclosure statement forms are available on Council's website or from the Customer Service Centre and must be lodged in accordance with the Act. In dealing with development applications, councillors need to take into account specific matters contained in the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act 1979. Accordingly, the provisions of 4.151 of that Act are set out in the Council Officer's report detailing issues to be considered. The Local Government Act 1993, Section 375A requires that a division be called whenever a motion for a planning decision is put at a meeting of the Council. Planning decision means a decision made in the exercise of a function of Council under the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act, including a decision relating to a development application, an environmental planning instrument, a development control plan or a development contribution plan under that Act, but not including the making of an order under Division 9.3 of Part 9 of that Act. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Zaknich. Apologies. Thanks, councillors. Councillor Glacken.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to move the recommendation as a motion that receive and note the apologies from councillors Cameron and King and grant leave of absence for the meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Doxey.
Happy to second, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Happy to put the motion. All those in favour? We have Councillor Vanderven and Councillor Con on the screen as well. The motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. We have no Merrill minute. We have action plans. Thank you, councillors. Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that the following action plans be received and noted. 1, actions complete for noting only. 2, actions awaiting response from external parties. 3, actions in progress. And 4, long-term issues more than 3 months.
Thank you. Councillor Stutchbury.
Second that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley, do you wish to speak to that at all?
Just briefly, most councillors will be aware that over the weekend I sent out an email relating to the Cultural Precinct Master Plan, and this is one of those items that comes up with the matter relating to the Ivor Memorial Museum. And I noted that in May, Council moved that the matter be treated urgently, I think the words were. So it says the concept plans and other items will be included in the scope, which is anticipated to commence in the second half of 2020. And we moved, I think, in May that this be treated as a matter of urgency. And my comment really is that there's so much going on in this space with Bellbridge Hague, with the Diocese of Wangaratta, with the redevelopment of the conference centre, that we need to be sure that we don't get left behind and are just left with almost no options, and we just have to deal with it. So I do believe it is a matter of urgency and should be progressed as soon as possible. And I did receive that email and response back from Ms. Squire.
Thank you, Councillor Thurley. Question, Councillor Stutchbury.
Not a question, just a comment. I agree with Councillor Thurley. I think this matter needs to move along a little quicker than would appear to be apparent from the action plans. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. No more further speakers for or against. Happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. Councillor Vanderven, Councillor Con both voted for. Okay. The confirmation minutes of the previous meeting held on Monday, the 22nd of June. Thank you, councillors. Councillor Doxey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move the following recommendation that the minutes of the council meeting held on 22 June 2020 at 6:23 p.m. be confirmed.
Thank you. Councillor Stutchbury.
Second that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Councillor Doxey, do you wish to speak to that?
No, thanks, Mr. Mayor.
No further discussion. Have put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. No reports from community forums. Notices of motions and notices of rescission. Councillor Con.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that council officers A, develop a strategic approach to supporting the growth of mountain biking in Albury, including but not limited to 1, maintenance plans for current trails, 2, the provision of additional infrastructure such as parking, shade, toilets, bike repair stations and safe connectivity for cyclists, 3, possible sites for future trails of varying difficulty including pump tracks with a preference for land that is not zoned for environmental conservation, and 4, prevention of unauthorised trail construction and associated safety and environmental risks. B, that this be developed in consultation with key stakeholders, including but not limited to mountain biking clubs, bike shops, youth council, the Sustainability Advisory Committee and Friends of Knowcan Hill. And C, report the above to councillors no later than March 2021.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley.
I'd like to second the motion, Mr Mayor, but I'd also like to indicate that I have a slight amendment if Councillor Con would be happy to accept.
Councillor Con.
Happy to hear the amendment.
The amendment is simply to add to part 4 the words "and rehabilitation of said unauthorised trails."
I'd be happy to accept that.
Thank you, Councillor Con and Councillor Thurley. Is that been put in?
Terence is about to do it, I suspect.
And Mr Mayor, with the permission of my seconder, I also wanted to move an amendment to my own motion, which was from community feedback today after this motion had been made public.
Yeah, what's the amendment, Councillor Con?
Just under A part 2, there's a list of infrastructure there. I'd like to add signage to that list.
Pump tracks with a preference for land that is not zoned. Is that the section you're
So
talking
part
about? Oh,
2.
no, position of additional infrastructure. Yep, okay.
That's all.
We've got 2 questions waiting in the midst until I get signage on number 2.
It's there now, Kev.
Yep, okay. Thank you. Councillor Doxey, you have a question? Before we
Thank you,
start
Mr Mayor.
debate.
My question is to Councillor Con. I think it is a good motion. However, in para B, can I get clarity of Friends of Knowcan Hill? Because I know in the report that we've all seen, it doesn't include bushwalking and it doesn't include, in particular, the Wiradjuri people.
Councillor Con?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Part B is deliberately worded key stakeholders, including but not limited to. I'd absolutely welcome the addition of other groups as appropriate.
I'd be happy to see the names in that para, please.
Yeah, I'd accept that amendment.
Thank you.
So what are you including in part B, Councillor Doxey?
Councillor Con might want to craft this one, but include the Wiradjuri people and bushwalkers.
Yep, okay. Not including but not limited to mountain biking clubs, bike shops, youth council. Friends of Knowcan Hill, bushwalkers and Wiradjuri representatives.
You've misspelled Wiradjuri there.
It's his first time. I get the gist too.
Thank you, Mr Mayor.
We can amend the spelling so we can start debate. Councillor Con, did you wish to open debate? Thanks.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, mountain biking is a really growing sport in Albury, and particularly during COVID restrictions, we've seen it really take off. And on one hand, this is absolutely fantastic. I think it's great that families want to get outdoors, that young people want to get outdoors and get active and enjoy our beautiful natural spaces. But I think there's a problem that all of us would acknowledge, that the lack of facilities for mountain bikers has meant that mountain bikers themselves are unhappy with the lack of facilities like parking and toilets, which I understand are really important to get women into mountain biking. But that also means that unauthorised trails have been popping up all over the LGA. I've seen some unauthorised mountain biking jumps, etc., along the Bungabrawartha Trail myself when I've been running. I've heard reports of them popping up in Thurgoona, and of course we know that they're all over Nalcan Hill from the recent audit that was done. So I think a solution to that problem is for us to take a strategic approach. We need to make sure we're providing adequate facilities to cater for the growth of mountain biking, and that includes all of that ancillary infrastructure. It needs to cater for varied levels, and ideally it should be spaced around the LGA and not just at Nalcan Hill, so that young people growing up in other parts of Albury can participate in this growing sport as well. And I think that also needs to take into account that a lot of our hills are zoned for environmental conservation, and the other users of Nalcan Hill who enjoy our endangered wildflowers, who enjoy bushwalking, are also unhappy that there are unauthorised mountain bike trails everywhere, and that mountain bikers seem to be using the whole of Nalcan Hill. So I understand that some good work has already been done in this space by council officers. We know that there was an audit just done of the trails on Nalcan Hill. We know that there's a pump track going in at the new regional skate park. But I think that we really need to take a strategic and a holistic approach to this, so that we can provide the infrastructure that mountain bikers need, and also do that in a way that acknowledges the need to protect our sensitive environmental areas. I strongly believe it can be done. I've consulted with council officers who've let me know that March 2021 was an achievable deadline, and I'd hope to see all of your support for this motion. Certainly since the council agenda was made public, I've received absolutely loads of feedback for this, and some of those were those minor amendments, but in general there was overwhelming support for us to be taking a serious look at the future of this sport in our city. Thanks, councillors.
Thanks, Councillor Con. I have a question from Councillor Glacken as Speaker 4.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the most relevant member of staff. Would it be possible, and just to highlight that Hank's got a question. Would it be possible for us to look at this holistically with other areas within the LGA, as highlighted by Councillor Con already in her opening remarks, with a view to linking a number of facilities? We've got Wonga wetlands and the boat ramp just up from there. And I remember we've done some exploratory work with regards to areas not too distant or not too physically far from Wonga wetlands and the boat ramp. And I'd like to see if it would be possible to coordinate and link those ventures with a view to enabling, as Councillor Con has suggested, a bigger picture plan within the community. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Who are we looking at? Mr. Ferris. There's a lot of looking going on there, but.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Yes, certainly that would be part of the brief for the plan for the strategy, would be to look at citywide and even connections, you know, with our neighbouring councils, etc., about how we can link some of those facilities to the trails and the overall strategy.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ferris. Thanks, Councillor Glacken. Speaker 4, Councillor Thurley.
Question from Councillor Vanderman.
Yep, Councillor Vanderman.
Yeah, is my microphone on? Yeah. Just a question through you, Mr. Mayor, to the relevant member of staff, probably Mr. Zachnich. Was Councillor Con aware of the work that Council staff had already been doing in this space prior to the notice of motion being put forward? And secondly, do we really need more signs in environmentally sensitive areas? Can't we just publicise all these trails on the in the virtual space, in a digital space, rather than having ugly signs at the start and throughout these things. So it sort of defeats the purpose to a certain extent if you're having ugly signs in environmentally sensitive areas.
Thanks for the question, through you, Mr. Mayor. So the audit trail report was identified in the, you'd recall, councillors, the submissions to the draft budget process we've recently gone through, and a range of submissions made there and responses during the public exhibition process of the draft budget. And the audit trail report's been provided to councillors more recently, a detailed copy today. So certainly all councillors were aware of where we were up to and where that process is up to now. Secondly, signage or any other of these facilities that have been identified in the notice of motion, best practice will be, the plan is to identify best practice or better practice in the strategy development. So looking at what are state-of-the-art facilities and planning for mountain biking in a locality like this, and look at examples where it's been done really well, not just in Australia but internationally. That'd be the intention of the strategy work and the consultation to take place.
Councillor Vanderman.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley.
I'd
Taking
just
forward.
like to speak very briefly in favour of this motion. As a city, we're blessed with the topography. We've got a lot of mountain bike facility very close to urban areas. We don't have to send people out to remote locations. You can mountain bike on Nail Can Hill and you're 10 minutes walk from the CBD. And it clearly is a growing sport. And I recall back in June 2015, and thank you, Mr. Ferris, for the information, we had the Evo City series of mountain bike championships and we had over 200 competitors here. So it's a growing sport and something that Albury-Wodonga can easily cash in on.
Thank you, Councillor Thurley. There appears to be no further questions or speakers for or against. Councillor Conn, did you wish to close debate?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm very appreciative that no councillors has spoken against this motion, and I'm sure there are hundreds of people across the community that will really look forward to this work happening. To Councillor Vanderven, I've had conversations over the last 6 months with members of staff from various departments, including planning, natural environment, parks and rec, and as I mentioned in my opening, there's lots of good work being done to support mountain biking in various departments of council, but my concern is that work was either reactive or opportunistic rather than strategic and holistic, and taking into account the whole of the LGA, the growth of this sport into the future, and the need to balance that with careful management of our environmental lands. I think this will be a really important step forward, and I'm very excited to see that work in March 2021, and I'm sure all of those groups listed in Part B, as well as the many others who've already been in contact with me this week, will really look forward for the opportunity to have their say. I know there are lots of people with fantastic ideas about which trails we could or should connect, or where new trails should go, and I really look forward to those members of the public being able to have their say and for the future of mountain biking in Albury. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Conn. On that note, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Councillor Conn, Councillor Stutchbury, Councillor Vanderman, Councillor Doxey, Councillor Mack, Councillor Glacken and Councillor Thurley. The motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. CM10, there are no representations and deputations. 11.1 minutes, the Audit and Risk Improvement Committee. Councillor Glacken.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To move the recommendation as a motion that recommendations of the Audit Risk and Improvement Committee meeting held on Wednesday, 3 June 2020. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thurley.
Second the motion, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Includes Councillor Vanderman, Councillor Conn. The motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. Minutes of the Local Traffic Committee held on Thursday, the 18th of June. Councillor Doxey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move the following recommendation that the council, I better look at the other one, receives notes and accepts the minutes recommendation of the Local Traffic Committee meeting held on Thursday, 18 June 2020.
Thank you. Councillor Stutchbury.
Second that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Doxey, do you wish to speak to that at all?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Happy to put the motion. All those in favour, including Councillor Con and Councillor Vanderman, the motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. Minutes of the Les O'Brien Athletics Precinct Advisory Committee meeting held on Wednesday, the 10th of June. Thank you, councillors. Councillor Thurley.
Happy to move the council receives, notes and accepts the minutes and recommendations of the Les O'Brien Athletics Precinct Advisory Committee meeting held on Wednesday, the 10th of June, 2020.
Thank you. Councillor Doxey.
Happy to second, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley, do you wish to speak to that at all?
Thank you, Mr Mayor.
No question or debate. Happy to put the motion. All those in favour, including Councillor Con and Councillor Vanderman, the motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. The minutes of the Lauren Jackson Sports Centre Advisory Committee. Councillor Vanderman.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll move that council receive, notes and accepts the minutes recommendations of the Lauren Jackson Sports Centre Advisory Committee meeting held on Wednesday, the 24th of June, 2020 by Zoom.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley.
Second the motion, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Any further, wish to speak to that, Councillor Vanderman?
No, thanks, Mr Mayor.
Happy to put the motion. All those in favour, including Councillor Vanderman, Councillor Con, the motion is carried. Thank you. CM12, documents for sealing, 12.1, Councillor Glacken.
Thank you. Through you, Mr Mayor, to move the recommendation as a motion. The recommendation is that Council authorises its seal to be affixed to the documents outlined below in the presence of two signatories authorised to affix the seal pursuant to Regulation 400 of Local Government General Regulation 2005 and the Council seal and management of legal documents and advice procedure to A, Albury City lease renewal with riding for the Disabled Association at 435 Diggers Road, Lavington for 6 years commencing 1 July 2020, file 01783. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Doxey.
Happy to second, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Glacken, do you wish to speak to that?
It's a document. Thank you.
Thank you. No further question or debate. Happy to put the motion. All those in favour, including Councillor Vanderman and Councillor Con, the motion is carried. Thank you. Okay. Officers' reports for consideration. 13.1, development application for Hume Country Estate stages 3 and 4. Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move that Council A receives and notes the contents of this report, and B, grants development consent to development application 10.2017.3528.1, proposing the subdivision of part lot 34 in DP 1217032 Union Road, Glenroy, into 31 Torrens title lots with access roads and stormwater retention basins in 2 stages, subject to the conditions contained in the draft determination included as attachment, whatever in this report, 5 in this report.
Thank you, Councillor Thurley. Councillor Glacken.
Happy to second that.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley, do you wish to speak to that at all?
First of all, I have a couple of questions. There is a comment in there somewhere that says that it ensures water quality meets the 50 milligram per litre standard, but it doesn't say what of 50 milligrams per litre of what. I presume it's suspended solids or non-filtrable residue. Thank you. That's a yes. The other question I have is that in the report, it talks about retention of hollow-bearing trees, and it says if these are to be retained, 1 lot will be lost, which means are we granting development consent to 31 lots or 30 lots?
Mr. Christie.
Thank you for the question. For you, Mr Mayor, it would become a 30-lot subdivision as a result of the consent. The applications for a 31-lot subdivision, council may decide not to impose that condition. So it would become a 30-lot subdivision should they impose that condition.
Thank you, Mr. Christie. Any further questions, Councillor Bell?
Well, I suppose my follow-up is my understanding is that council will impose that condition. Otherwise, I don't think I could vote for it because the hollow-bearing trees was a significant issue, and it seems for a very minor change we can retain these trees, and I assume that is a condition of the consent.
Mr. Christie.
Yeah.
Do you have an answer for that one?
Yes, and thank you for the question. So the application is for 31. As a result of the condition, then it becomes 30 as a result of complying with the condition. But the application's for a 31-lot subdivision, hence the title remains 31-lot subdivision.
Okay. Councillor Thurley, you should open debate.
You've got another question.
Question?
Could I ask the most relevant member of staff, would it be appropriate for us to put in brackets after point B for Councillor Thurley and
Mr Mayor, I can't hear the
My question.
question.
Thank you. Would it be appropriate, Mr Mayor, to the most relevant member of staff, for Councillor Thurley and I to be moving the recommendation as a motion as on the board, as explained by Councillor Thurley, but to have in brackets after B, at the end of B, subsequently this would become a 30 lot subdivision, etc., because I think that is the question that Councillor Thurley has, and I appreciate entirely why he's asking, because my understanding is that the document that we have appended, which is the one that we would be having as the conditions, indicates that it would be 30 lots. And I understand Councillor Thurley's concern with the appearance, that we're saying it's a 31 lot subdivision, but we're really wanting it to be a 30. Would that be possible to the most relevant member of staff? That might be the General Manager. I don't know.
Mr Christie, I think it's you.
Yep, and thank you for the question for you, Mr Mayor. If council wish, they can change the title. Said the application was for a 31 lot subdivision. It's not unusual for council to impose conditions which may require amendment to an application as proposed, and generally the description will only be changed if it's going to be significantly different. So, for example, if council had proposed a condition saying you no longer have stage 2 and then became a 17 lot subdivision, then yes, I would say it'd be incumbent on council to re-amend or to amend the title of the application. The application was for a 31 lot subdivision. We've asked for one of those lots to be dedicated to us as a reserve. Technically, that is still creating a lot. So it's still a lot that's being created. It's just not a sellable house lot.
Thank you, Mr Christie. Councillor Thurley, would you like to? Oh, we've got another question, upside down question. There you go. Councillor Vanderman, your mic's off.
I know that, Mr Mayor. I was in the process of turning it on. So if I get Mr Christie's answer correct, under item A7 in the draft development consent, it says, in this case, the road reserve adjoining lot 66 is to be widened to accommodate the identified tree, and lot 71 is to be dedicated a reserve to council. So in actual fact, it is still a 31 lot subdivision, but one of the lots is dedicated to council. Is that correct?
Yeah, thank you for the question for you, Mr Mayor. Yes, that is correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Christie. Thorough examination. Councillor Thurley.
I'll be very brief. We've gone through the issues. This has been an application a long time in the making. It's been subject to a fair bit of scrutiny, and I'm really pleased that we've managed to arrive at a decision which protects significant trees. There are quite a lot of trees being removed, but a lot of that's just natural regrowth, very young. The important issue here is we've saved these hollow-bearing trees. We've got the retention basins for stormwater retention. I think that we've gone from a development that had quite a few flaws in it to one which I think I'm very happy to support.
Thank you, Councillor Thurley. No further question or debate. I'm happy to put the motion to division. Those in favour, Councillor Vanderman, Councillor Con, Councillor Stutbury, Councillor Doxy, Councillor Mack, Councillor Glacken and Councillor Thurley. The motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. So we've got CM 13.2, and I understand there's 3 councillors stepping out. I've reviewed the policy, the code of meeting policy, and there's nothing in there that states there must be a quorum for specifically relating to DAs. It's just a quorum at the start of the meeting. So I've sent an email to Mr. Zackney. Mr. Zackney, do you have any further detail on that matter?
Thanks for the question through Mr Mayor. Yep. So the advice is that we would defer the matter until there is a sufficient number of councillors in place to make that decision.
So do we need to amend the code of meeting practice or no?
No, not
Doesn't
necessarily.
reference DAs where I can see, but anyway, okay. Excellent.
So we can defer to the next meeting, and
Yeah.
and there is time to prepare a submission still if council wishes to do that before the JOPP will consider the matter.
Thank you. So we're deferring 13.2. So do you need a motion or just move on? Okay. 13.3, development application, the veterinary hospital at a proposed lot 502 Diamond Drive. Thank you, councillors. Councillor Stutchbury.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move that council receives and notes the contents of this report and grants development consent to development application 10.2020.35747.3.1, proposing the construction of a single-storey veterinary clinic and signage on the subject site described as lot 3032 of DP 1243616, Thurgoona Drive, Thurgoona, subject to the conditions contained in the draft determination included as an attachment to this report.
Thank you. Councillor Glycan.
Happy to second that. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Stutchbury, do you wish to open debate? There's a question from Councillor Vanderman. It's like sale of the century here. He puts it up pretty quick. Councillor Vanderman.
Yeah, my microphone's still on from the last one. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for the opportunity to ask the question. I'm really concerned about the veracity of the information that was sent to us by, I think that is the Thurgoona community, regarding the removal of trees from that precinct. I want to know from council staff, most relevant council staff, how much of the information provided in that email was correct.
Mr. Christie.
Yep. And thank you for the questioning for you, Mr. Mayor. And I'll just assume that this was the letter that was dated 10th of July 2020. This makes it I'm referencing the same email for information. Yep. Thank you, Councillor. So yes, in regards to the tree removal on this site, council did consider tree removal as part of the application for this site previously. In the application, the approval for this site, which included 14 trees, granted development consent to that at a council meeting, and they've removed those 14 trees off this site in accordance with the consent. There's also been tree removal on the adjoining proposed lots on this site, which is the essence of, I guess, the main issue that's come through from the Community Action Group. So those trees were approved for removal under the construction certificate plans approved as part of development application 36431, which was for the 7-lot subdivision, which was one that council refused development consent for initially, and then granted development consent through agreeing to consent orders through the Land and Environment Court proceedings, which we talked through last year with Namini. So the tree removal outside of the vet site that occurred on the site is accordance with the construction certificate plans approved on that, with that development consent.
Councillor Vanderman.
Follow up, I just threw my question card into the rubbish bin. Just hang on, I'll rescue it.
A rubbish question.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. So that addresses one of the issues, which is the neighbouring block. What about the allegation that there is trees removed from across the road? And the second part of the question is, has the response that Mr. Christie has given to my question been conveyed to the Thurgoona Community Action Group?
Mr. Christie.
Yep, and thank you for the question, Mr. Mayor. I answered that in two parts. So Community Action Group did raise this with us initially, and so we did say we would investigate. That response hasn't been provided. I've only just finished the investigation this afternoon. So that response hasn't been provided, but it will be provided to them tomorrow when they have a chance to compose and provide that response. So the plan, which the councillor obviously won't be able to see here, is the construction certificate plan, which has removal of trees on proposed lots 501, 502, 503, which is on the same side as the vet clinic, and the larger lot 601, which is on the southern side of the Diamond Drive extension. So it did also include the removal of trees on that southern side.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Vanderman. Prior to opening debate, Mr. Christie, also the substance of the letter mentions the species of tree. My understanding was that council staff would provide some guidance as to what trees they replace, and it would appear that Thurgoona Community Action Group are not happy with one which appears to be on the weed-wise register, which must be a very serious register. It spreads weeds, and the other ones are not native. Is there some clarity around that particular issue? They're not Claridash, by the way.
Yep. Again, thank you for the question for you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, so their submission to the actual DA raised that issue. They were concerned around the trees that were identified on the landscape plan. So there's been a recommended condition that they actually amend the proposed vegetation on their landscaping plan for council approval prior to commencing works and getting a construction certificate. So we did agree that they could have been, there could have been some better species chosen, more appropriate species chosen is probably the best language. And so we've put a condition on there requiring those species to be approved by council prior to issue of a CC, which is, again, not an unusual process for a development application.
So when will that be reviewed?
So that'll come to council, as in council staff, not to a council meeting.
Yeah.
When they, I guess for them it'd be around their timings, but they'll need us to approve it before they get a construction certificate to commence the building works on site.
Thank you. Councillor Stutchbury. You've forgotten. You need to open debate.
No, the debate has been quashed by the questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stutchbury. There appears to be no further question or debate on this item. I'm happy to put the motion. Councillor Vanderman, Councillor Con, Councillor Stutchbury, Councillor Doxey, Councillor Mack, Councillor Van Glacken and Councillor Thurley. The motion is carried. Thank you. Having a moment tonight. Okay. We have a development application for a multi-dwelling at 739 Peel Street, and I have Councillor Con being put in the naughty room. Councillor Con, are you being put in the naughty room? Brad? There she goes. Okay. Councillor Vandervan.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'll move the recommendation that Council A receives the contents of this report and grants consent to development application 10.2020.37316.1 for a multi-dwelling housing development comprising construction of 3 additional residences, garages, retaining walls, tree removal and 5-lot community title subdivision subject to the conditions contained in the draft determination, included at attachment 5 to this report. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Stutchbury.
I'll second everything but the blah.
Blah, blah. Okay. Councillor Vanderman, there are no questions. Do you wish to open debate?
No, I think this is relatively straightforward. There's nothing really controversial with this one. So I will reserve my right of reply.
Well, there appears to be no speakers for or against this application. So did you want to reply now? Or
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I'm happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Division, Councillor Vanderman, Councillor Stutchbury, Councillor Doxey, Councillor Mack, Councillor Glacken and Councillor Thurley. The motion is carried and we can introduce Councillor Con back to the meeting. Thanks. Thank you, Councillor Con. You're back online. Okay, we have 13.5, the planning proposal, inclusion of artisan food and drink industry in various land use tables in Albury Local Environment Plan 2010. Thank you, councillors. Is that a type of food? Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that Council A endorses the planning proposal and forwards it to the Minister for Planning, seeking an amendment to the Albury Local Environment Plan 2010 and request that a gateway determination be issued, including the delegation of plan-making powers so as to enable the public exhibition of the planning proposal pursuant to the EPNA Act 1979. B, upon receipt of a gateway determination under Section 334 of the EPNA Act 1979, Council places the planning proposal in any supporting material on public exhibition pursuant to any requirements of the gateway determination, Schedule 1, Clause 4 of the EPNA Act 1979. And C, should no objections be received, furnish a copy of this report and other relevant information to the New South Wales Department of Planning, Industry and Environment and/or New South Wales Parliamentary Council's Office in accordance with the EPNA Act 1979 and request the Minister for Planning or a delegate on their behalf undertake the appropriate actions to secure the making of the amendment to the Albury Local Environment Plan 2010.
Thank you. Councillor Stutchbury.
Second that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley. Do you wish to speak to that?
You have a question?
Question from Councillor Vandervan. That's the right way up.
Yeah, well, I had to turn it around. Is there any, sorry, Mr. Mayor, through you to the relevant member of staff, is there any prescription around the size of any of the, like the tasting areas or the restaurants or anything? It just says that it must include one of the following, which is a retail area for the sale of the products, a restaurant or cafe, or facilities for holding tasting tours and workshops. So you can provide a 4 square metre space to hold one person, and that could technically be enough to provide facilities for holding tastings, tours and workshops. Is a prescription of the minimum size of these facilities warranted in this case, or is that left to some other instrument of government to determine?
Mr. Christie.
Thank you for the question, and for you, Mr. Mayor, I'm just grabbing up the component of our legislation to give a precise answer for our local environmental plan. But in short, just buy some time while the actual answer comes up to me. The idea of artisan food and drink premises are that their first and foremost component is the creation of the product on site. So the idea in layman's term, in essence, is that there's a brewery on site, for example, and they happen to have some tastings and or restaurant associated with it. So there used to be the issue the state government was dealing with is that a lot of the time in industrial areas, they could have an actual brewery, but they could not have associated tastings or the like of the product. And then same if they were a restaurant, then they couldn't manufacture the level of scale required to be able to do it. So the government came up with an interim approach to deal with what's a very burgeoning area of the tourism food and craft market over the last 5 to 10 years, and came up with in essence, a marriage between the two. The idea is, though, is the predominant use is still to be as a manufacturing premises, whether it's manufacturing food, whether it's brewing beer, distilling gin, or whatever the product happens to be. And that there's a smaller component where they then have the opportunity to be able to deal with members of the public interacting. That's why they've made it a subset of light industry rather than as a commercial use. So to give a practical example, if we look at the Albury Brew House, the idea is that's a restaurant with a couple of vats. If you look at, say, Bridge Road Brewers in Beechworth, there's a significantly large brewing area and a smaller eating area. Now, those areas can still grow in scale and in size, depending on how they were going. Without getting the precise answer, it's under our definition under the 5.4. So I've just got to scroll myself to page 48. Now it's brought up, councillors. If I can just have just a moment to give you the precise answer, which is artisan food and drink premises. They're generally related to a maximum of 20 to 25% of the area of the building. So through from that, it gives you an idea that it's around a quarter of the size can be utilised for tastings, sitting down if there's a restaurant or cafe. 3/4 of the site, in essence, needs to be used for the production purposes.
Thank you,
Councillor
Mr.
Vandervan?
Mayor. And thank you,
No
Mr.
worries.
Christie.
Thank you. Okay. Councillor Thurley.
I don't think there's much need for debate. We're simply putting something to the Minister for a gateway determination, and once we get it, this goes out on public exhibition for people to make a comment.
Thank you, Councillor Thurley. No further question or debate. Happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Councillor Vandervan, Councillor Con, Councillor Sutchbury, Councillor Doxey, Councillor Mack, Councillor Glacken and Councillor Thurley. The motion is carried. Thank you. 13.6 is the Glenmorris Memorial Gardens car park and road design. Thank you, councillors. Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that Council accepts the tender from AP Delaney and Company for contract number 20/01517, Glenmorris Memorial Gardens car park for the lump sum amount of $178,640, including GST.
Thank you. Councillor Glacken.
Very happy to second that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley, did you wish to speak to that?
It's a fairly straightforward tender and a very competitive price.
Thank you. There being no further question or debate, I'm happy to put the motion. No, all for it. Councillor Vanderman, Councillor Con, Councillor Stutbury, Councillor Doxey, Councillor Mack, Councillor Blacken and Councillor Thurley. The motion is carried. Thank you. Okay. 13.7, Mate Streetscape upgrade and water main renewal. Thank you, councillors. Councillor Con.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that council accepts the tender from XL Grey Brunei Proprietary Limited for contract number 20-01614 Mate Streetscape upgrade and water main renewal, Tarracan Avenue to Union Road in the lump sum amount of $856,510.60, including GST.
Thank you. Councillor Glacken.
Happy to second that.
Thank you. Question from Councillor Stutbury before I go to Councillor Con.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I recall that in recent times we've debated a tender where it was decided that XL Grey Brunei, although they were the, I think, cheapest tender. I did try and research this, but I couldn't find it. Although they were the cheapest tender, it was elected by staff that as they were too busy at present to do the job, they would give the job to the second cheapest tenderer, which I think from memory was Mitchell Constructions. And I can't remember the job, but it was either a car park out at Lavington Sports Ground or it was something else. Anyway, so now I'm a little unclear as to how staff are sort of thinking about these things, in that now we've clearly decided that XL Grey Brunei now not so busy that we can accept their second cheapest tender for this job. I'm confused. So my confusing question needs to go to the most relevant member of the staff, in that what exactly are we doing here?
Mr. Lawson.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for the question. Yeah, the assessment panel determined that considering that XL Grey Brunei have a major project in Wagga Road that they're currently undertaking for us, which is nearing completion, determined that they had available resources to undertake this project. And they also determined that due to the fact that their program was a shorter period of time, that would be more beneficial to the businesses in that area with regard to less disruption.
Thank you, Mr. Lawson. Councillor Stutbury, any further questions?
Well, I was thinking of a follow-up, but it didn't really come into my head. So unless someone else can follow up for me, no.
Councillor Vanderman can. Councillor Vanderman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do have a question. I'm just trying to put my information together here. So on this particular, this is the one for the, okay. If I go back to, if I go back just briefly, Mr. Mayor, and I will get to the question before somebody calls a point of order. On the previous tender we've decided, the qualitative for AP Delaney was 87. The qualitative for XL Grey Brunei was 94. And the qualitative for Mitchell Constructions was 72. They're the scores that they got. Now, if we skip forward then to this particular one for the Mate Street, which is the one we're now talking about, the qualitative for XL Grey Brunei is 96. The qualitative for Mitchell Constructions, the qualitative for XL Grey Brunei is 94, so that's consistent. The qualitative for Mitchell Constructions is 79, and the qualitative for AP Delaney is 75. How can we explain such a huge difference in the qualitative assessments for those two jobs for AP Delaney and for Mitchell Constructions? XL Grey Brunei is consistent, 94 and 94. So please explain to all of us why there's such a big difference in that qualitative score for Mitchell Constructions and for AP Delaney.
Mr. Lawson.
Mr. Ferris.
Mr. Ferris.
Through you, Mr Mayor. So each one's done on the submissions by, it's twofold. So they're two different types of projects. One is a standard road construction at Glenmorris Gardens with curbing. The other one is a business environment in the middle of a CBD footpath. So water main works as well. So they are different projects. So companies are assessed differently on their experience and their background and their expertise in that area. And it also then depends on the submissions themselves and the quality of them and the detail they go into, in particular methodology and programming, where methodology and programming are probably less critical at Glenmorris Gardens. They're certainly critical at Mate Street, where we'll have major interruptions to business, pedestrians and traffic. So they are completely different projects, and they will be assessed on the relevant of each of the tenderers there, as well as the information they've provided as part of those tenders.
Councillor Vanderman?
Yeah, look, my only comment at this stage is I still don't think we've got this process correct. Maybe Councillor Suttree would concur, but I don't think we've got this process right yet. I think we need to have some way of having some maybe three parts to this whole process. One is a standard, tendering documentation is filled in every year and submitted to council, and then we look at each of the projects and the money, separately. Because I would have thought that AP Delaney were.
Point of order, Councillor Vanderman. Is there a question?
Yeah, there will be a question.
Thank you.
Who raised the point of order, Mr. Mayor?
Councillor Thurley.
Oh, did he? I didn't hear it. Would he like to tell me again what the point of order is?
Councillor Thurley.
I didn't hear a question. You're debating the methodology.
No. Well, I mean, do I get a chance to actually expound on my discussion so that I eventually get to a question, or?
For sure. Way you go, Councillor Vanderman.
Is there a way, perhaps down the track, that we can have a look at this whole situation again? Because I'm not comfortable with that great variation in the qualitative assessments for all of those three contractors.
Mr. Ferris.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. We're certainly always looking for ways to improve our processes, and we've just initiated a review of our procurement process again, just to see if we can streamline it a bit further than it currently is.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So is Councillor Thurley happy now that we've asked the question and got an answer?
We're all done. Thank you. Councillor Suttree, question. Make sure it's a question, please.
Yes, indeed, Mr. Mayor. I do have a question. Thank you for the opportunity. My question is to the most relevant member of staff. In previous tenders, it has been decided by council staff that tenderers are potentially too busy to do a job that they've tendered for us, even though they may have the most competitive quote. Given that many of these businesses tender to organisations other than Albury City Council, how in fact do council staff know that an organisation is too busy to realistically tender for a job for Albury City Council?
Mr. Ferris, that's a tricky one.
Yes, through Mr. Mayor. With compulsory that they submit a current commitment schedule with every tender, and where each of those projects are up to, so we've got a clear idea of what their current commitments are.
Follow up, Mr. Mayor.
You shall, Councillor Suttree.
Mr. Ferris, through you, Mr. Mayor. Could councillors be appraised of those current commitments in reports in future from now on, please?
Mr. Ferris.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, they are included in the comments for each of the tenderers in the qualitative assessment.
Thank you, Mr. Ferris. Thank you, Councillor Stutchbury. Thank you, Councillor Con. Can you open debate, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That was a long time coming. Look, I'll be really brief. I'm quite happy with the recommendation to award the tender to XL Grey Brunei, particularly given that the work will be completed 3 weeks shorter. I think in terms of disruption to the community on a big project on a main road, that's really a priority for me, and I'll be supporting the staff recommendation. I did want to take the opportunity to put on the record my displeasure that cyclists weren't considered in the design, and it's far too late to do anything about that now. But that was discussed previously at a workshop, and it's disappointing that when we do major road works like this, that we're not taking that opportunity to improve conditions for cyclists who do use these main roads as a means of transportation. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Con. There appears to be no more speakers for or questions. Happy to put the motion. All those in favour, including Councillor Vanderman and Councillor Con, the motion's carried. We got there. Okay. 13.8 Community Energy Fund. Councillor Glacken.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor, to move the recommendation that council approves the allocation of the Community Energy Fund to the following applicants. A, Springdale Heights Preschool, 13,950. B, Westside Community Centre, 17,450. Hothouse Theatre, 12,980. D, Flying Fruit Fly Foundation, 6,800. E, Albury Wodonga Equestrian Association, 18,821. F, Thurgoona Men's Shed, Albury Women's Shed Joint Application, 6,500. G, Moresby Park Preschool Incorporated, 11,850. And H, the New South Wales Rural Fire Service, $7,369. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Glacken. And seconder is Councillor Thurley.
Second the motion, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Glacken, did you wish to speak to that?
This is a great initiative in so much as we are assisting our community groups to ensure that they can keep their costs as low as possible with regards to energy, which is often a significant cost to many community organisations. But the clincher is that we're also helping our community by developing our own infrastructure whilst these facilities are used by these organisations. So the infrastructure is essentially that of councils. And so we're bettering our community with a couple of, by way of a couple of fronts. And so I think it's a great idea and acknowledge that this will absolutely assist these organisations in addition to ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you. I have another speaker for, but I have a question from Councillor Vanderman. Councillor Vanderman.
A bit of a surprise. I've got another question. Through you, Mr. Mayor, I don't think there's any detail in this report about the number of, like, let's say the Springdale Heights Preschool, what the size of the solar panel installation is, what the payback period is, how much they're going to use themselves, how much is going to go back to the grid. I just wonder whether that information is available for councillors to have a look at. And then secondly, to get some economies of scale, is it possible that we as a council help all of the applicants go through a competitive tendering process with 3 or 4 major solar panel suppliers? So it would be a good thing both for the organisations involved and the various people in our community who actually do solar installations to be aware of an opportunity here to provide 7 or 8 quality installations around Albury.
Thank you, Councillor Vanderman. So, Councillor Thurley, you were on that committee. Are you able to assist Councillor Vanderman with that detail or not? Mr. Ferris, you can. You can.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. We'll certainly provide the information that come in the applications to councillors out of session for their information. And we intended to assist in project management, and Councillor Vanderman's suggestion is is really a good way forward if we can do economies of scale, just depending on each of the applicants' interest in being involved in a bulk purchase.
Thank you. Councillor Vanderman, you comfortable with that?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley, you wish to speak for the motion.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. A lot of that information that Councillor Vanderven just mentioned was provided to the Sustainability Advisory Committee. Many of the applicants had done quite detailed business cases justifying their application. I think the only thing I'd like to add to Councillor Glacken's comments is the total project cost here was about $134,000 and we're getting it for $95,000. So these groups themselves were putting in about $40,000. So it's a big win for the community, for the council and for the community, and another step along our road to minimising our carbon inputs.
Thank you, Councillor Thurley. It's encouraging to see that the women's shed is on the application. That means they're moved in. Okay. Councillor Glacken, there are no further question or debate. Happy for you to close debate. Thanks.
No, thank you.
Okay. Happy to put the motion. All those in favour, includes Councillor Vanderman, Councillor Con. The motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. 14.1, the construction bond options. Councillors. Councillor Thurley.
I move the council receives and notes the contents of the report.
Thank you, Councillor Vandervan.
I think my mic's on. Yes, I second that motion, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any questions before we start debate? No? Okay. Councillor Thurley, away you go.
Is that directed at me, Mr. Mayor?
No. I just
Oh, no,
was
that's
looking
okay. I'm just getting a bit sensitive, that's all.
looking at all the screens, that's all. Yeah, okay. Councillor Thurley.
There's not much to be said. We've got a report which is a response to a previous council request. It throws up some good points, and I think we just need to see what comes out of the exhibition of this policy.
Thank you. No further question or debate. Happy to put the motion. All those in favour, including Councillor Vandervan and Councillor Con. The motion is carried. Okay. It's 15.1, the Murray-Darling Association Delegates Report, June 2020.
Thank you,
Councillor
Mr. Mayor.
Thurley.
I move the council receives and notes the Murray-Darling Association Delegates Report for tabling at council June 2020.
Thank you. Councillor Stutchbury.
Second that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley, do you wish to speak to that at all?
Very briefly, in the past, I've presented the Region 1 meeting minutes for this council, but on this occasion, the National Association has prepared a report for all delegates to give back to their councils, which shows what the whole of the association is doing. And I'd just like to note a number of things which appeared in this report. One is the commentary around the Lower Lakes Scientific Review, which has been carried out and completed. I'd hoped it would put a furphy to bed. There is still one scientist, at least I know, who is claiming that they've still got it wrong. Most others seem to accept it. And the other issue, which is of great importance, is the matter of floodplain harvesting, which is still causing major confusion across the basin. I think that can only be resolved by the Ministerial Council getting their act together and cooperating and talking to each other. I'd like just to take the opportunity, if I may, to indicate that the MDA will be holding its 76th annual conference as a virtual conference on the 14th and 15th of September this year. We have a range of speakers, and the conference will be divided into morning and afternoon sessions on those 2 days. We've got speakers like the Interim Inspector General, Ramjo itself will be presenting, the National Farmers Federation, the ACCC, the Wentworth Group of Concerned Scientists, Bruce Pascoe, the author of Dark Emu on an Indigenous perspective. And finally, I'd like to just commend a group of primary school students from Stirling East Public School who've written a book called Murray-Darling Basin Calling Questions Unanswered. And they attended our conference in Toowoomba last year, and they've put this to governments and politicians. They're concerned. These are primary school kids from Stirling East. It's a brilliant piece of work, and I commend the initiative of these kids. If these are the future leaders of our country, we're in good hands.
Thank you, Councillor Thurley. Speaker 4, Councillor Vandervan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I just support Councillor Thurley's comments, but also can I note Councillor Thurley's continuing contribution to the MDA on behalf of Council, and his excellent representation of Albury City Council at this body. So I congratulate him for his continuing work in this space.
Thank you, Councillor Vanderman. Councillor Thurley, are you comfortable to close debate?
I think I've said sufficient, and thank Councillor Vandervan for his kind words.
Thank you. Happy to put the motion. All those in favour, including Councillor Vandervan, Councillor Con, the motion is carried. I have no notification of urgent business. Councillor Doxey.
Mr. Mayor, with your indulgence, I think last meeting we failed to recognise the award of the Medal of the Order of Australia to Councillor Thurley for his work. I'd like that to be put forward now, please.
Thank you. Okay, I'd like to acknowledge Councillor Thurley for his the recipient of the Order of Australia Medal in recent June's honours list. Well done, Councillor Thurley, and congratulations from everyone here at Council, including all the staff. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Doxey. Okay, we have no confidential matters. The meeting closed at 7:11.